I always thought I was a difficult baby, but what if my mom's blame was misplaced? She claimed I hated her, but my grandma revealed a shocking truth about my early days. Was I really the problem, or was it my mom all along? I still remember my mom's words, "You were a difficult baby, Jessica. You hated me from the start." Her voice was laced with resentment, her jaw clenched. "You were born 2 weeks early, and that was just the beginning of your problems." I tried to defend myself, but Mom, I was just a baby, I didn't know any better. She cut me off. "No, you were a difficult baby, and that's why I had such a hard time with you." But then something happened. My grandma, who lived with us back then, sat me down and said, "Jessica, I need to tell you something." Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. "Your mom would wake you up every time she left the house, even if you were sleeping. You were always so tired, so hungry." As I sat in our worn, beige armchair, the same one where I spent countless hours as a child, my grandma's words dripped like slow poison. The faded floral pattern on the chair seemed to whisper secrets, and I felt the weight of her gaze on me. Her eyes, a deep, tired brown, seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. "She'd stop feeding you when she thought you'd had enough," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'd cry, and she'd say it was because you were a difficult baby." I remembered the countless times I'd heard my mom say that, her jaw tightening, her lips pursed. "But I was just hungry," I whispered, my eyes locked on my grandma's. "I was just tired." That's when I realized something was wrong. My mom's actions, not mine, had been the problem all along. My grandma's hands, wrinkled and worn, reached out and grasped mine, her touch warm, comforting. "I'm so sorry, Jessica," she said, her voice cracking. But then something happened, a shift in the air, a change in the tension. My mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing, her voice cold. "What's going on here?" she asked, her tone slicing through the silence like a knife. I stood frozen, my grandma's words still echoing in my mind. "She'd wake you up every time, just to say goodbye," she said, her voice cracking like glass under pressure. My mom's gaze snapped to her, her jaw tightening. "That's not true," she spat, her words venomous. But then something happened. My grandma's eyes locked onto mine, and she whispered, "I'm sorry, Jessica." Her apology hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. The ice cracking outside seemed to mirror the shattering of my childhood illusions. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't just losing my childhood, I was losing my mother too. My mom's face twisted in anger. "You're just now telling her this," she hissed. I stood in my dimly lit living room, the afternoon sun casting a faint glow through the blinds, as my grandma's voice cracked like glass under pressure. "She'd stop feeding you, Jessica, even when you were still hungry," she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and stale coffee. My grandma's wrinkled hands trembled as she clutched her cup, her knuckles white with tension. "You'd cry, of course, because you were desperate for more." But then something happened. My grandma's gaze drifted off, lost in the memories of my childhood. "I'm so sorry, Jessica," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The silence that followed was oppressive, punctuated only by the creaking of the old wooden floorboards beneath our feet. I stood there, my grandma's words hanging in the air like a challenge. "You were the most tired baby I ever saw," she said, her eyes clouding over. I remembered the exhaustion, the desperation for sleep. My mom's voice echoed in my mind, "You were a difficult baby, Jessica." But then something happened. My grandma's voice cracked like glass under pressure. "I felt awful about the way you were treated." I looked at her, and for a moment, I saw my own childhood reflected in her eyes. "She wouldn't feed you enough," she whispered, "you'd cry, and she'd say it was your fault." My jaw tightened, I didn't blink. The creaking of the floorboards seemed to fade away, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat. "But my mom still holds me crying as a baby against me," I whispered, the words tasting bitter. "Some people believe my mother's actions were just tough love. Others say it was emotional abuse that scarred me for life. So I ask you, should I forgive her or stand my ground? What do you think?" I stood in my dimly lit living room, the shadows cast by the faint afternoon sun dancing across the walls like restless spirits. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and stale coffee. My eyes drifted towards the worn armchair where my grandma had sat, her voice cracking like glass under pressure as she revealed the truth about my childhood. "You were the most tired baby I ever saw," she had said, her words echoing in my mind like a haunting melody. But then something happened. I glanced around the room, taking in the familiar sights: the faded family photos, the dusty vase on the mantel, the faint scratch on the coffee table. That's when I realized something was wrong. My mom's words, "You were a difficult baby," still lingered, a constant reminder of the blame she placed on me. My mom had heard from somewhere that she shouldn't feed me as much as I wanted. I whispered to myself, the memory of my grandma's words still fresh. She would stop the feeding at a certain point, even if I was still hungry. I could almost hear my grandma's voice. "So of course you cried." The sound of my own cry, a distant echo, seemed to reverberate through the room. "Stop being so sensitive, Jessica," my mom's voice flashed in my mind, a sharp reminder of the pain she had inflicted. My jaw tightened. I didn't blink. The creaking of the floorboards seemed to fade away, replaced by the sound of my own heartbeat. I walked over to the window, the glass cold against my fingertips, and stared out at the gray sky, the clouds a deep, foreboding gray. "You were a difficult baby." My mom's words still lingered, a constant reminder of the blame she placed on me. And this is where everything changed. I realized that no matter what I did, my mom would always hold my crying as a baby against me, a constant reminder of the pain and the blame.
Hello, I'm Dr. Julian Reed. The story presented here is a classic example of emotional manipulation, where the antagonist, Karen, employs a tactic known as gaslighting by proxy to distort the narrator's perception of reality. In my years of studying toxic relationships, this pattern appears more often than people realize, where an individual uses a third party, in this case, the narrator's crying as a baby, to shift the blame and responsibility onto the victim. This psychological manipulation works by creating a narrative that undermines the victim's self-worth and autonomy, making them doubt their own memories and emotions. The antagonist, Karen, uses the narrator's infancy as a means to justify her own abusive behavior, implying that the narrator was somehow responsible for their own suffering. This tactic is particularly insidious, as it exploits the narrator's vulnerability and lack of agency as a child, making it difficult for them to refute or challenge the narrative. The narrator's emotional reality is one of pain, shame, and self-doubt, which is entirely valid given the circumstances. The feeling of being blamed for one's own suffering, especially when it occurs at a vulnerable age, can have long-lasting effects on a person's mental health and self-esteem. It's essential to acknowledge that the narrator's emotions are not exaggerated or unfounded, but rather a natural response to the toxic behavior they've experienced. The use of gaslighting by proxy in this story serves as a means to control and manipulate the narrator, making them question their own sanity and memories. This tactic is often employed by individuals with narcissistic tendencies, who use it to maintain power and dominance over their victims. It's crucial to recognize this pattern and acknowledge the harm it can cause, as it can lead to severe emotional trauma and long-term psychological damage. If you've ever had your reality twisted like this, forced to doubt your own memories and emotions, you understand why these stories matter. Subscribe to Soul Stories, because truth deserves witnesses, and it's time to shed light on the toxic patterns that have been hiding in plain sight.